Hey everybody, I just got home, so I have my neck mount with me, and I figured maybe I would revisit the double-sided fabric that I posted about earlier, and it would give me a chance to try out this mount and see how I like it, and maybe kind of show off some of how this works as opposed to just the photos. This is the second swatch I did after I kind of figured out what I was doing, and I really like how it turned out. It's just nice and square, the edges and everything. This is where it started. I used Rosebud start, my normal start, and then it kind of just goes back, around. It's a compressed tube, so everything is just one piece of fabric, and it's really, really dense, really thick. I like how it looks. I really, really like the edges. And I don't know, I'm just kind of excited about this idea, and I could see this having some really good applications for flat work. I think a blanket out of this it'd take forever, but would be really, really incredible. Anyhow, so let me show you the first kind of row, which is the one that's kind of different from everything else, but this is all super easy, and it's kind of great because the fabric tells you what to do. It's not counting, it's not being very precise, it's listening and following along after you get the basic foundation set up. And so it's pretty mindless. Like, sitting and doing this I was not even paying attention, and I really like how it turned out. So this is you do your foundation chain. I did a Rosebud start, my normal. This is finish 2+3, which is just my go-to for worsted weight yarn, because it's a nice size for my thumb, and I usually get kind of a gauge I'd like. So I just made a starting chain, real normal, all the way across. And so this is like your first row, and so you want to go into your second row, and that's the part that's a little different than everything else, but not by a whole lot. So this is our first row. You make this as wide as you want the piece of fabric to be, and then to start the second row is you're going to flip it over, and you're going to be working with these back middle loops. Let me get one on this needle. So on the back, you can see them kind of running around the middle. That's what you're going to use for your connection loops on this first row. Everything after this is different, but this is the row that sets you up to what you have to do, and it's not really that complicated. I'm going to use F1s for all of this. I did do F2 with the original sample I had for some of it. It was just very dense, and you didn't need it to be that thick. I think this keeps a little more stretch and a little more drape in the fabric if I just use the one connection at this gauge. I think this would also look really great with like a sport weight or even like a fingering weight yarn. It would make a really, really cool fabric with a lot of drape. But anyhow, so this is our foundation row. It's the first one that's done. This is how it comes off your thumb. We're going to flip it over so we have these back loops for finished stitches. Different kinds of stitches, like Russian stitches, will look a little different, but I think you could probably modify and adapt for most of them. But so, like I said, we're going to use these back loops for our connection for the second row. You need to count in a couple, like probably 3 or 4 from the edge. Do whatever seems right, because of course these are the back sides of some of the loops on the front, and everything's interconnected, so you don't want to start too close or you're going to choke up on your stitches. So I'm going to start here, which I think is 1, 2, 3 out, which should be fine. And then you just go like normal across this row. So this is a finish 2+3, so 2 on the front, 3 on the back, and this second row you just work your way across. It's really helpful to kind of keep an eye, because it can get a little confusing when there's more going on if you're not as versed, I guess, and maybe as reading the fabric that you're working on. But if you really just kind of pay attention, you can see, like, this was the last loop I picked up, so I'm going to go to the next thing that looks like that. And this is all you're going to do for the second row. You're just going to make your way across back to kind of where you started the chain. Just picking up one loop from the middle of the back, so one wrong side loop. Just like that, all the way across back here to the beginning. Because I used the Rosebud start, these little loops go all the way to the edge so that there's no wonkiness here. I'm going to swap out. That was just to kind of show you what the first row looks like. After you do that, it's going to look all the same after that, and that's where this comes in. So this is like a double layered fabric. Let me see if I can show you. So this is the normal connection loops. So like this is the row that you'd be working on. So these are your normal connection loops, and then this is the back. And you can see those middle loops that are just like right there and lined up with these. These are what you pick up together to kind of make everything look, to work the way it does. So let me put this on here and I'll show you what it looks like. So for the second and every other row afterwards, it's the exact same process. So, you know, there's our normal stitches, there's our F1. And so you can kind of see on this last loop that there's the two pickups. This one is from the wrong side of the back fabric, and this is from your front fabric. And that's where we made that loop in, so we just continue all the way across. So that's going to be our connection. And that's what we use for the entirety, everything after that foundation row. So I'm going to get my F finish 2 plus 3, pull that across. And so as you're working this, you're making this front row, you can kind of see it there, maybe? Yeah. And it's just tacking it down to the back of the opposite side, so it's just this solid piece of fabric. As you work along, you can see, so there's our front connection, back connection, they go all the way through, and there's always a matching pair. And it's pretty easy once you get going to see exactly what you're picking up. As you can see, when you get down here to this end right here, the back one stops. So you're going to pick that up last. There's probably a couple more in there. Don't go looking, burying, or digging up the buried ones, because you don't need them. This is the point where you do the both. You pick up this and that's the last stitch of the two kinds. And then to turn the corner, like I showed in the pictures, you just use these front loops that are here, and they look the exact same. So you just stop connecting it to the back of the fabric to turn it, and then you start again. Okay, so I zoomed in a little bit for this part. Later on, if I was doing like a nice full video for YouTube, I would edit this a little nicer, but this is just kind of, again, to try out the equipment. But I'm going to kind of finish off this row and show you how that looks like this, and then turning it. And then that's it. Like the entirety of this is just the, you know, your foundation row. Every row after it looks the same, and then just rounding the corners is the only place where you just pick up the front instead of both. And that's the whole process, like just over and over again. Super easy, like I said earlier, very kind of mindless, but makes a really great fabric, which I think is like a good combination. You want something to look nice and impressive, but not always be super, super complicated and give you a headache to do. So I'm just going to kind of finish this row and then do the turn so you can see what that looks like. Hopefully I keep everything in frame. We will see. So there's our last stitch that we picked up. So we're going to scoot over, and we need one from the front, one from the back. And it's a bunch, you know, you can see that row of V's that are stacked on top of each other. So you're going to pick up both legs of a V. Let me do that again. And I'll do a bunch of these so you can kind of just watch. So there's our connection. Again, finish 2 plus 3. So 2 on the front, 3 on the back. And I'm just going to make these until I run out of those back loops. And I think I have enough thread to do that. So we'll see. If not, I'll cut it again. Okay. One from the front, one from the back. There's our little V. One from the front, one from the back. This is a little awkward with my phone in my face, so it is a little smoother in person. You can do this at whatever your normal clip is for just binding anyhow. Okay, front, back, stitch. And then again, always kind of look like what was the last thing I did and what looks similar, because sometimes it can get a little tight, especially towards this end. This becomes a little bit of a ring. But, you know, just keep going one by one. So there's the front loop, there's my back loop. I got a couple more. See, this is where it's kind of getting tight. So I'm going to look, and there's the loop on the back, and just keep doing it. And then after this, there's only 2 more of those back bumps. So I'm only going to do 2 more stitches before I do my turn. That's what has been working out. And the turning, the stitch count does not have to be exact. Some of these are a few more than others. You're kind of just doing what the fabric tells you to do. So it's not too fiddly of a process. It's not very number specific, because really all you're doing is just disconnecting that middle mesh that you're making so you can turn around the corner. Whether that's a stitch or 2 off is not going to make a difference. It hasn't so far. So there's this, and this is where like a little tricky on the last ones. I'm going to pluck this up first. So that's the loop I'm going for. And it's being a little stubborn. All right. There. Front loop, back loop, stitch. And that might be the last one I do. We'll see if that other one got buried. Okay, yeah, so you can see here that there's not really another back loop to pick up. Like there's our little V. And there's not another available back loop. So I'm going to switch to just these front loops. And you can see they wrap around right here. They go around. And I'm just going to do, I'll say 3 to 5. I think it's usually right in that ballpark, just enough to get around the side and not pull our fabric. And so these are just going to be F1s. So there's the F1. So that's our first one. I'm just going to count to see how many it is. But again, it's flexible. It doesn't matter. Do whatever you need to get around the fabric, and they don't have to match every time. And so looking at that again, there's our last loop. So this is the next one we're going to do. Another F1 to round the corner. Okay. And then this is kind of what I use to gauge when to start again. You can see these are our front loops again. These are the middle back loops that we're going to use. And you can see how when they're pulled out, there's just that nice little chain of V's. And so keep doing like they're not disconnected, but only using the front loop until you can get to this position on the front, and you can see 2 that line up that make sense. So I'm just going to do that many, because right here I can see this front loop and this back loop. And this is a good way to test is stick your needle through. Those line up pretty well, and that's not choking anything up too tightly. So around the side, I think we did 3 just F1s. Now we're going to start up again with tacking it to the back. So there's the F1 and then the wrong side one. This stitch can be a little tight right here, but just follow your instinct. Again, this is F2 plus 3, so there's 2 on my thumb. There's 3 on the back of my needle there, kind of hard to see. And then just going to make a stitch like that. And then this is where you just continue again, picking up your 2 connection loops. Like there's that's sticking out. And I'm just going to go to the next 2. And then keep going. And then this is just all you do. These first couple stitches, have faith. Make sure you pick up your back loops in order, because it can just be a little snug just till you're back, the first 2 or 3 stitches until you're feeling like you're working flat again. So front, back, stitch, pick up my back loops. There we go. And so that's it. And then you just do this until the end, and you just kind of repeat the process. I think that's all of the components shown. I am going to experiment with this a little further because I think it is a really, really, really promising technique, because I think you could do some really cool stuff with color work. And it is nice, I think I mentioned in the post and maybe in the first part of this video, that you can bury your tails in the middle between these two pieces of fabric. So, you know, this little groove, that's kind of the hollow part of your fabric. And here is where all your tails and stuff can be tucked away, and while you're working, you can just tie knots if you want to instead of splicing. But that would be a great place to also hide like color floats or a lot of kind of interesting things. And it would be great because a lot of the time, even if you work flat, there's going to be a right side and a wrong side because you have to work your tails in unless you have wool and you're really good at like wet splicing. But this would make for like good double-sided. So like a scarf, you wouldn't have a wrong side. Both sides are going to look the same and they're going to be great. And I think that's just, I don't know, that has a lot of promise for things to use. I think this might be how I approach flat projects. I don't do a ton of flat projects because, you know, getting the right selvage or making it look good is kind of rough. This is obviously not exactly the same as a single layer of fabric. I would say it's like 1.5 because the rows are staggered. Like where the middle is on this side and the middle on that side, like they kind of sit like this. So it's not like full on double thickness. I would say it's probably about like 1.5. So it is a little thicker than if you were to do just normal, but definitely still within the realm of like a useful functional fabric. This little swatch is going to be like a face scrubby thing. I'd like to make a bigger one, like a washcloth, because this would be great for scrubbing. But I think that's all I have to say on this. We'll see how the video turns out, and hopefully this equipment works better, and hopefully I stayed largely in frame. We'll see. It'll get better, but anyhow, I just thought maybe you guys would enjoy that. It gives me a chance to test this out, see what my equipment looks like, show off this fabric, which, because I don't think the still photos did it justice. It's really kind of cool. And maybe other people could give this a shot and let me know what you think about the process.